Welcome to week 10 lecture, and this week groups 12 and 13 made their presentations, and thank you group 12 and 13 for your presentations. And before we begin today's discussion, let's briefly connect the two presentations and readings, right? The both readings examine how K-pop operates within a participatory digital media environment. In this environment, fans are not just passive consumers, and we've been talked about this, right? They're not passive anymore, right? And they actively participating in promoting artists, sharing content, and interacting online. That's what we have been already talked about, right? But then they go beyond, right? So K-pop fandom can also extend beyond entertainment. Fan communities sometimes engage in social discussions, cultural debates, and even political activism, right? So today's presentations help us understand how K-pop connects entertainment, global culture, and politics in the digital age. So let's start with Group 12's three main arguments. They identified the following three arguments, right, as main. And the first one is K-pop as an alternative to Western cultural dominance. And the second argument says that the fan practices become political tools. That is the key theme for this week, right? And the third argument is K-pop redefines protest music, right? And then they made course connections and the internal connections to three previous articles, one about symbolic boundaries, and second one about digital fandom networks, and the last one about the transnational fandom, right? And I don't know, in the presentation there is this application, real life application. I don't know, they're meant to be external connections or not. It'll be helpful to just name it. The conventional, we have this practice of conventional for this course, this presentation, what is internal connection, what is external connection, right? So, I mean, real life application is good, but if you add that, whether that's like, external connection you're making, what is one of the required, sections for the presentation, right? And the discussion questions, first one, if K-pop fandoms organize political action themselves, does this change how we understand protest music and social movement? And second one, why is K-pop fan activism often minimized in Western media? Is it because of perceptions of K-pop as manufactured pop or stereotypes about the fandom demographic, right? Interesting question, especially the second one. Is kind of like worth really think about it and thought provoking, right? And these two questions help us think about how K-pop culture and politics interact in new ways. And building on group's presentation, I want to just briefly talk about platform politics, right? One reason K-pop fandom can organize political actions so quickly is that these communities already operate on global platforms such as Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, right? So fans are constantly using these platforms to coordinate their regular fan activities like streaming campaigns or sharing updates and organizing online events, right? Because this communication network already exists, it can easily be used for political action when a political issue appears, right? And for example, during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, many K-pop fans participated in online activism. They used hashtags, shared information, and coordinated digital campaigns that spread across different countries very quickly, right? And this shows that political mobilization today often depends on platform infrastructure. Without those, they cannot move that fast, right? Or they cannot be connected globally either, right? So in other words, digital platforms are not just space for communication or entertainment or enjoyment. They also shape how political participation happens. And K-pop fandom is therefore a good example of what scholars call platform politics. where social media networks become tools for large-scale political coordination. Another way to understand K-pop fandom is through the idea of or concept of cultural citizenship. Cultural citizenship means that people use cultural participation, such as music, media, or fandom, to express their identities, values, and political beliefs. Right? In the case of K-pop fandom, many fans feel connected, not only through music but also through shared social concerns. Fans often organize campaigns related to social justice, environmental issues, or democratic movements, right? And for example, the K-pop for Planet campaign, organized by fans, pushed companies to address environmental issues. In that campaign, fans used petitions, online campaigns, and protests to pressure corporations. What is interesting here is that fans are not simply consuming culture. They are not passive anymore, and they are using their fan networks as a way to participate in global public issues such as the environmental issues or poverty, things like that. So fandom becomes more than entertainment for sure, right? In this sense, it becomes a transnational civic space where people can express political identities and coordinate collective actions, not only just values and identities, but they actually work on it. They, participate in these actions, right, to make real changes. Okay, let's move on to Group 13's presentation. And there are three main arguments. The first one, K-pop fandoms can mobilize for social causes. And second one is K-pop draws from Black musical traditions. And third one is global fan communities shape political discussions, right? And the internal connections they made to Joe's article about participatory fan culture. And they also made some connections to external examples, right? And again, I think this Group 13's presentation, they use external connections for maybe external to the reading that they were assigned, right? But for this course, internal connection means connections from course readings, course materials to the assigned reading, and external connections mean external to the course readings, right? So the discussion questions, the first one was about the K-pop artist responsibilities in regard to using Black culture forms, and this question is very worthwhile. It's really worthwhile thinking about. And this has been a kind of a debate. Has been a kind of issue for some time, right? And I'm gonna touch on this issue a little bit later. And the second question: should global fandoms engage in social justice movement or just remain focused on entertainment, right? And that's also it's worthwhile. It's a very thought-provoking question, because there may be some debates like a fandom should engage in social justice movement, or some other people believe that you shouldn't do that. It's just focus on entertainment, right? So it's an interesting question to think about. And let's move on to a little bit of things that I want to add on to Group 13's presentation, right? So how about the fandom political mobilization today? Because the reading focused on 2020, right? So one key idea from the reading is that fan activism did not start suddenly in 2020, and it also did not really end there. I mean, the article was written in 2020, but we know it's now 6 years later. We know it just now has not ended there, right? In 2020. But rather, the digital structure of fandom itself make this kind of mobilization possible. And let's think about how K-pop fandom normally operates, right? Fans already organize large-scale activities online, right? And we already talked about it a few times. So these activities require coordination, speed, and digital literacy. So when a political issue emerges, fans can easily redirect these same skills and networks toward activism, right? So this means fandom networks function almost like informal political infrastructures. Another important point is that these fan communities are transnational, as we already have discussed many times. Fans live in many different countries, but they communicate through the same online platforms. Because of this, political conversations in fandom spaces often become global discussions, naturally, right? But then another point, on the other hand, we have to think about this tension, right? For example, during the Black Lives Matter protest, some international fans strongly supported the movement, but other fans argue that, Black Lives Matter was that's only a U.S. issue, right? And that Korean artists should not be expected to respond to American politics. So fandom becomes a space where different political perspectives collide. And in this sense, fandom communities today are not just entertainment communities. They are also site of global political discussions, debates, and mobilization, right? So this lead to, it's closely related to Group 13 second discussion question. Do we have to, do fandom should really work on, they have to be engaged in politics, or they just have to focus on the entertainment, or their, idols just focus on that area, right? And finally, let's talk about the issue of global culture, race, and K-pop. One of the key points in the reading is the K-pop musical style did not develop in isolation, right? And also Group 13 clearly presented many of its musical elements come from Black American music, especially hip-hop and R&B, right? And these genres influence K-pop's rap style, rhythm structures, dance performance, or even fashion style aesthetics, right? So because of this, discussions of K-pop often raise questions about cultural borrowing and cultural appropriation, or cultural appreciation versus cultural appropriation, right? And, cultural appropriation is just, almost kind of stealing or borrowing something from other culture without any appreciation or any understanding, right? So cultural exchange is a normal part of globalization, right? We always borrow from other culture. And music has always traveled across borders and influenced different cultures. That's historically, right? However, problems rise when cultural elements are taken without recognizing their historical and social context. So, for example, certain hairstyles, fashion styles, or visual aesthetics connected to Black culture have sometimes been used in K-pop without acknowledging their meaning in Black communities. Or sometimes, it's like they borrow certain aspect and it's being making fun of, right? That's kind of an extreme example. Not in only K-pop, but some like comedies or, things like that, or like some entertainment shows and things like that. So this issue remains very complex actually, and K-pop is not simply Korean culture exported to the world as we have talked about in this course, right? It is a hybrid global culture product shaped by many different histories and cultures and influences, right? And the Black musical tradition and culture being one of the major influences, right? And that is why studying K-pop can also help us understand broader questions about globalization, race, and cultural exchange. And in conclusion, these presentations today show how K-pop fandom is both global and highly participatory, and fans are not simply audiences. By now we know for sure, right? And they form large online communities that communicate, organize, sometimes mobilize collectively, right? And because these fan networks operate on global digital platforms, they can influence cultural discussions, even political conversations, right? In this sense, K-pop is not just a music industry phenomenon. It is also part of a larger system of global media, digital participation, and cultural exchange and politics, right? Okay, this is it for today's conversation, and thank you for listening, and I will see you next week.